So we thought we'd put together a short video about lenses, more specifically lenses that are most commonly used across unscripted program making.
So when you're booking lenses, you're probably just looking at a bunch of numbers, and unless you're hands-on with the lenses, it is really difficult to understand fully what those numbers mean. So we're going to sort of try and just talk you through a bit of that jargon and just sort of empower you with a bit more information. So next time you're booking some lenses and you're seeing a bunch of numbers on the page, you have a bit more of an idea about what they mean.
Absolutely. And so Sony really sort of have the market cornered in this sector now. In the sort of self-shot market, Sony now have the market, and we're backing that trend. Most of the lenses we stock are Sony G Master lenses, and it's because they're designed and built to work seamlessly with the Sony cameras. We mostly supply, as we've talked before, the FX3, FX6 and FX9 cameras, and a lot of unscripted self-shot telly is made using those cameras. So Sony have basically just ploughed all of their effort into creating lenses that work harmoniously with those cameras, with features like autofocus and other things that make them a great companion. And they fit into two camps: prime lenses or zoom lenses.
So I'd say 95% of the clients, just production companies that we supply, actually just take the Sony GM lenses now. If you're shooting anything that's actuality based, zoom lenses are going to be your go-tos. You're going to need some sort of zoom lens. Generally, you've got two main sort of, I guess we call them kit lenses. I know it's a bit of a sort of stills term, but main kit lenses. So the focal lengths for these are 24 to 70 millimeters or 24 to 105 or 105 millimeters. Now the focal length, just to bring it back to basics, basically is how wide or how tight the shot is. So if it's 24 millimeter, it's quite wide, and if it's 70 millimeter, it's quite close. So 24 to 70 is a fairly wide shot to a fairly close shot. 24 to 105 is obviously going that third closer. And they are your sort of two kind of go-to lenses for most actuality.
Yeah, I mean, think of it that the lower the number, the more you're going to see in a frame, basically, and the bigger the number, the tighter you are, the more zoomed in you are, basically, to the less there is in the frame.
So there's another number that's quite confusing that you will see. So if you were seeing these written down, you would see Sony 24mm dash 70mm and 24-105mm. But then next to that, you'd normally see a small f / and then a number. And it's generally either, when you're talking about zoom lenses, anyway, 2.8 or 4. Now, you might say, well, look, this is 24 to 70mm, this is 24 to 105. Well, why would I go for this one? Because 24 to 105, if I need the extra length to zoom in on my subject, I've got it. So why would we go for this one and not this one?
It's all to do with how they're built and the aperture. That f-stop is the aperture, essentially, which is how open the lens is, which means how much light is coming into the lens. And with extra light, creates that depth of field, that blurry background that everyone aspires to creating. So the lower that f number, so f2.8 for example, you'll get a really nice sort of sharp image with what's in focus, and behind you and in front of that will be nicely sort of defocused. And you can get lenses that go right down lower than 2.8. You can get sort of f2, f1.8, f1.4, f1.2, which you're really getting into sort of super shallow depth of field where your subject is in sharp focus and everything just millimeters behind it is out of focus.
I mean, it looks great, but from a shooting point of view, you can be in a situation where you're focus pulling between somebody's nose and their eyes, and the danger is more of it's out of focus than in focus. Generally, for actuality, 2.8 is the sweet spot, but Sony don't do an f2.8 in every focal length. So, like anything, it's compromised. Shooters will go for the 24 to 70 if they want that glossy look, but if they need that extra bit of focal length, i.e. they need to be able to zoom in further because of the application that they're shooting, they'll have to go the 24.
And they're happy to compromise a little bit on that depth of field.
This one here is another Sony GM. It's a different design. It's much larger.
It's another f4 as well.
This is 28 to 135. This is a great lens. It's got a servo zoom on it, mainly for things like police programs when you're on the shoulder with one lens, you've got no time to change lens, and you might need to go from being as wide as you can at the back of a police car or following an officer on the street, and then you might have to zoom in on something that's being pulled out of somebody's pocket or some sort of actuality that you get one take at. This goes to 135mm or 135 as we say. So again, it's not the most amazing looking lens in terms of shallow depth of field because it's f4, but it gives you that full functionality. So for those sort of actuality purposes, it's a great lens.
And it's like anything, these are all tools, and it's just about using the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
So every tool comes with some sort of compromise, and you just got to work out what you're happy to compromise on. So then the next zoom lens is a wide lens, is a wide zoom. So Sony really only do one in the G Master range, which is a 16 to 35. So 16's very wide. You can, get plenty of external property GVs, internal property GVs. You could shoot interviews on them if you just want to be a bit wider and you want to see more of the background of the subject. So yeah, and that is f2.8 as well. So that's a nice focal length.
And the other one you've probably booked a lot if you're ever booking Sony G Master lenses is a 70 to 200. So this starts at 70 millimeters, going to 200, which is obviously that bit further than any of these other lenses here. Application for this one, you'd have it in your kit bag to shoot anything like details for GVs, mainly for like interviews, like those apprentice style programs when you want to shoot those sort of on the fly little catch up chats, but you want it to look glossy, you want to sort of shoot down the line of a busy road but blur it all out. Great lens for it. I mean, it's laughable how good this can look on a FX6 or FX9.
Yeah, and it gives you the ability to stand further away from your subject and still capture something that's still nice and tight in the frame. That's why it's sometimes quite good for sort of observational actuality as well.
So these are the main zoom lenses, which are for actuality. Then when you get into more your sort of controlled environments, some people are shooting actuality on these other lenses, but for most of the applications for prime lenses, you are talking about sit-down interviews or any kind of controlled environment. Because of the low f-stops and the real sort of cinematic look you're trying to achieve using these lenses, you need it to be controlled.
Yeah, I mean, the prime lens simply means it's a fixed focal length. So, unlike a zoom lens, if you put a prime lens on your camera, this is a 24mm, so it's nice and wide. Once you put that on your camera, the only way you can change that focal length is by simply moving the camera closer or further away from your subject. So it's about knowing which focal length you want. If you know you're shooting an interview, for example, in a particular room and you know the size of the room, you sort of know how much space you've got to deal with, and therefore you might sort of know what prime lens focal length you want. It's also to do with personal preference. A lot of people know what an 85mm prime lens looks like, from a certain distance when you're shooting an interview. Same with a 50mm. So yeah, we've just got a selection here, which is the most common selection of Sony G Master lens prime lenses. We've got a 24mm, a 35mm, a 50mm, an 85mm, and a 100mm. And they all range from different f-stops depending on what lens you're using.
I mean, 50mm is the most common for shooting an interview, and we supply the f1.2 version, so it's really shallow. You couldn't really shoot for telly that shallow, but it is a great lens, and it's just sort of main go-to for interviews. People are going for the 35s and the 85s now, and if you're shooting multiple cameras on an interview, so we said when we did a video about cameras, if you had a main camera of an FX9 or a 6 and you had a 3 as a second camera, you may have one on a longer or a wider lens and one on a 50mm lens. But generally, people would say, well, why would you go for a prime lens when you've got the zoom lenses that cover the same amount? Because I could set this to 50mm here and I could shoot at a 50mm focal length. But the prime lenses only shoot one focal length, so they are sharp at that focal length. And the zoom is going across numerous focal lengths. So when you get really technical lenses, a lot of photographers will say, every lens has a sweet spot where there's a certain f-stop with a certain focal length and it's a sweet spot. And then the flip side, you get other spots which aren't so sweet. Yeah. With the prime lenses, you will just have one focal length and it will look fantastic. And that's basically what makes them so popular for things like interviews.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think of it, they have been built for a purpose. So this has been built, this 50mm prime has been built just to capture images at that focal length. This is a zoom lens, so there are moving parts within this to achieve those different focal lengths. So yeah, it's like any tool that's been built for a purpose.
So we break down to lenses in terms of like what you need and what you're going to be able to afford within your budget. So Sony G Masters are, in our opinion, and most opinions of shooters out there we chat to, they're just a fantastic lens for the price point. You can go and spend 3 times the amount of money on a prime or a zoom with another brand of lens. But the point being for us is that you will not see images that are 3 times better than the Sony G Masters. So it's not saying you're wasting your money by going for something more high-end, but if budget's an issue, you're not going to see that money on screen. Yes, they'll be great to shoot with. Yes, they might be, fancy cine prime lenses. But you have to remember, when you're shooting any interview, it all depends on what camera you're putting it into, what lighting you've got. there's all these other variables
And
that are going
who's
to affect it.
who's
And who's using it?
as
And who's
well?
using it?
You know,
Yeah,
some of
who's
these
using it.
cine primes, these really expensive primes that are designed for film and high-end drama.
Yeah.
There are some self-shooters that perhaps might have used them before, or like the idea of using them. We get requests for them occasionally, and you know, as Bob said, some of them are several times the price of the Sony G Master equivalent, which is the bread and butter. But you won't see that sort of result on the end screen. And also using it, you need a focus puller or someone that really understands how to focus on those. They're totally manual lenses. They're just a different kettle of fish.
And if you're shooting unscripted stuff for ITVX, Channel 4, Channel 5, BBC, some of the streamers, the budgets just don't stretch to it, and it's not really a place, in our opinion, where you want to be splashing out on fancy lenses. The other question is like, you've got prime lenses and you've got zoom lenses at various focal lengths, but which ones do I need to shoot with? Now, if money was no object and someone said to me, what lenses do you want for a shoot? I'd say
all of the Sony G Masters.
All of them. Just put them in the van or the car and away we go. But the point is that budgets are tight, and especially in that unscripted world, you can't afford to take every single lens with you. You need the lenses that you're actually going to use and that you're going to get good value for money from.
And the time on location. You don't have time to be changing lenses all the time. So it's sort of factoring all of these points in, isn't it?
As a general rule, if you're looking at a kit list, you need to be looking for where focal lengths are overlapping. And that's basically where you can say, well, do we need both those lenses because we're only getting something a little bit extra out of it? For example, you've got a 24 to 70 lens, so that goes 24 millimeters wide. You can shoot a house and shoot some GVs with it, or you get 16 to 35. So you think there's only a little bit of extra focal length you're getting. So from 24 millimeter to 16, that's how much extra wide your shot is going to be. There are applications when you do need it. You want to go and shoot a really sort of bulbous wide shot of a property or something on a slider. But a lot of people now are finding that they're not going for the wide lens. They can just make do with 24, but that can afford them to take a prime lens for interviews and a long lens for on-the-fly interviews. I mean, I don't know, what would you say? In general, 95% of the unscripted series that we supply for the terrestrial channels that are making high-volume series, I would say they take an average of three lenses now.
Yeah, three lenses. So, you know, sometimes referred to as the Holy Trinity. You've got one of the two kit lenses, so 24 to 70 or 24 to 25. So one of those, your long lens, 70 to 200, and your 50mm prime, mostly probably for the interviews. And those three lenses will cover most bases. Yes. And if you can afford more, then fantastic. Then you've got more options. But at the very least, you can shoot most telly with that. And in fact, we even have a client, a BBC early peak series, property series, that shoot on FX9. And for the fourth year running, they take two lenses, the 16 to 35, so that's their wide zoom, and the 24 to 70. They're both f2.8, so they've got enough of a shallow depth of field without going crazy. And they've got focal lengths from 16 all the way to 70, and that covers them. That covers their property GVs, their internal GVs, external GVs, interviews, and actuality.
I remember, if you're shooting a series like the early peak when Reece is talking about, where you've got multiple teams shooting the same thing, you're going to get the same look, because anything that's a chat, 1, 2, 3 shots with contributors and presenters is going to be on this lens, and all your property GV is going to be on this lens. So you're not going to get that position where people are shooting something like, getting on the front end of a 200 lens on the wrong shot, which then in the edit suddenly doesn't cut with what the other series or the other PD shooting for the series. So there's a lot to be said. More can be, less can be more, I think, when it comes to lenses.
So without sort of feeling like a Sony G Master advert, we do supply the lenses. We've got some cine zoom lenses made by Fujinon, which are sort of a bit more classic, very different look. And we've got some Canon lenses. But we just wanted to sort of talk about lenses in general, specifically using the Sony G Masters as the prime example, because they're the most popular, and that's what most people are shooting on. And that's what we supply the most of.
And they're super budget friendly.
They are, yeah. So I think that sort of wraps everything up here. If we've missed anything or you've got any questions, as always, just reach out to us and let us know what else you'd like to hear about us from. So yeah, until next time, thanks very much. See you soon.